Well, that brings us to the idea of the Hong Kong and New York City agreements. Do you view them as binding for all the players?
I think they're as binding as the players want them to be, and some people will follow through and hold true to their word, and
Right.
others won't, and the world can judge them based upon that.
Well, do you think that there's anything that could have been done to get the Bitcoin core team to agree to be more collaborative? I mean, they've come out to be quite antagonistic towards this change, and that's maybe putting
And
it
even that's
politely. That's an understatement. Well, I mean, is there any reason? I mean, outside of just the pure religious adherence to the original concept, I mean, is there anything else that, I mean, what's the advantage of keeping the cap where it is?
there isn't really any advantage to it, and they've shown that they're not really willing to compromise on it in any way. So the on-chain scaling side, which is clearly in line with the original roadmap laid out by the creator of Bitcoin and the project that I got involved in, and everybody else, Satoshi Nakamoto laid it out that the ultimate solution is to allow the blocks to get as big as they need to be. And initially, there was a bit proposal that would allow the blocks to grow to 8 GB over time. And Blockstream and Core supporters, and they said 1 MB forever. And then the other side compromised and said, okay, how about we just do 20 MB immediately? We can discuss later. And the other side responded with 1 MB. And then we compromised some more and we said, okay, how about we go, 8 MB right away? The other side said 1 MB. And then we said, how about 2 for 8 MB over the next couple of years? And they said 1 MB. And then the final compromise was, how about we do 2 MB? And the other side is still at 1 MB and refusing to budge on the base block size there.
Well, do you think that
Um,
there's a problem in their language skills that they can only say 1 MB? I mean, is that their capabilities? That's
I don't
sarcasm,
think
of
that they're
course.
very good communicators. In all seriousness, I don't think that they're very good communicators. But
Okay.
one of the other really big problems that I think they have here is they're claiming that the reason we need to keep the blocks at 1 MB are so that anybody can validate a transaction on their home computer at home and run a full node. But by keeping the blocks at 1 MB, it's going to price all of these home users out of even being able to make a Bitcoin transaction. So they're saying that they want people aren't even going to be able to afford to make a Bitcoin transaction themselves because the fee will be so high. Yet they'll still be able to validate these transactions that they can't participate in themselves. That's absolute madness, and I want no part of it.
Was there a point in time when you were seeing this negotiation take place where you realized that the core team was never ever going to budge from this position? I
So I
mean,
used to be a big Blockstream and
I mean, I guess the
go ahead.
question I should say is, was there ever a time when you thought that there was room for some change from their position? Or did they always just, it was really hardcore, religious zeal?
No, they came in much later. So in the early days of Bitcoin, everybody just assumed and knew and that the blocks would be allowed to become bigger as more and more people started to use Bitcoin. And it was just unfathomable that people would ever try and limit that to 1 MB forever. And then these people came in later that don't understand economics. They think that people are going to pay $100 or $1,000 a transaction to use Bitcoin when there's 1,001 other competing currencies out there that are looking to take Bitcoin's market share and have started to take Bitcoin's market share.
Sure.
Um, this Every business is incredibly frustrated with this, and they're looking for alternatives. And we've watched Bitcoin's market share drop from high 90% to around 50% today as a direct result. And I hear a lot of these other people say, "Oh, Roger, look at this! Bitcoin's at an all-time high today. It's 5,000 something dollars." But they don't stop and think for a minute how many businesses stopped their Bitcoin adoption or didn't integrate new things, or all the projects that got put on hold or canceled because of these high fees and unreliable Bitcoin transactions. Bitcoin likely could have been $50,000 already today if it hadn't hit this scaling bottleneck, and Bitcoin would probably still have 90+% market share today if it hadn't hit this scaling bottleneck. So the fact that the price is only $5,000 today should make us, be crying over it because of the lost opportunity that we had there by these people without a clue when it comes to economics, stopping Bitcoin from being able to scale for more people to use it. And it breaks my heart as the first person in the world to start investing in Bitcoin startups and promoting this on a big level to people around the world, now my own business, we're having to look at what altcoins we're going to
Sure.
use, and
Right.
that's a sad feeling, and for no reason other than a bunch of people think that Bitcoin is going to be used no matter how unreliable the transactions are and how high the fees are. And they openly advocate for Bitcoin to have unreliable transactions. And they openly advocate for Bitcoin to have high fees. And I
Why?
used to be a
That
big
doesn't even
Blockstream
make
and
any
Core
sense.
supporter. In their twisted view of the world, they think that people need to be able to, every single Bitcoin user needs to run a full node on their home computer. And they
And
view decentralization as the goal. Whereas I don't view decentralization as the goal. I view censorship resistance as the goal. And decentralization is simply the tool we use to achieve that goal. And as long as we have enough decentralization to attain censorship resistance, that's all we need. But these other people seem to see the decentralization as a goal in and of itself. And they openly say they don't care how many people use Bitcoin. They don't care about adoption. They don't care about these things. As long as Bitcoin remains decentralized, that's good enough for them. Whereas I have the exact opposite view. As long as Bitcoin remains censorship resistant, and in doing so, we can undermine every single government on the planet's ability to control the money supply and control what people do with their own money. So that's my goal, which is very, very different than these other people's goal.
interesting. When you look at the companies that are trying to, right, companies and individuals who are backing away from their commitment on especially the New York Agreement, do you think that you're going to continue to work with them in any capacity, or is this really going to create a rift in the community that is going to like permanently segment and polarize different Bitcoin users?
I think the New York agreement is still very likely to happen. There's still, about 90 something percent of the businesses are on board with it. The only ones that aren't are businesses that don't actually have any users or serve any customers. A reoccurring theme I found in this debate, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that. I don't think it's
Okay.
an exaggeration. So if you look at the businesses that have customers and serve millions of users, the Coinbases, the blockchain.infos, the Zappos, the BitPays, the Bitcoin.coms, all of them are on board with allowing Bitcoin to scale to have more people to use it. It's only the businesses that don't actually have any customers and don't have any users that are opposed to this. And I've had I've had a lot of debates on the scaling topic. It's been a reoccurring theme. The next time you meet somebody who's in favor of the 1 megabyte blocks forever, ask them how often they use Bitcoin. Ask them how often they make a Bitcoin transaction. 9 times out of 10, they'll say that they hardly ever use Bitcoin and they just use it to save something and they think they're going to get rich off of it someday. But the only reason Bitcoin can even be used as a store of value is if it's used in commerce. And if Bitcoin isn't used in commerce, it can't be used as a store of value. It has to be both of those things, or it will be
Agreed.
neither. And I think these people don't have that understanding.
An interesting perspective. Well, here then is we're having 2x coming up in November. Do you think there's going to be a new Bitcoin created then?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see just how hypocritical the small blockers are, because their argument this entire time should be that there should never ever be a contentious hard fork. But in order for their chain to survive, they're going to have to either hard fork the difficulty or hard fork the proof of work for their chain, which is a major, major, major change on either front there.
Right.
And it's the exact thing that they've been claiming the entire time that you should never ever do. So when faced with the choice of their chain or their preferred version of Bitcoin completely dying and coming to a screeching halt, or being totally hypocritical in regards to everything they've said up till now, when they're faced with those two choices, I think they're going to choose the hypocritical route rather than their chain dies route. And I think we're going to get to see that happen. But at the end of the day, people want cheap, fast, reliable transactions, and that's what on-chain scaling provides. And limiting the block size to 1 megabyte provides expensive, unreliable transactions. So when you have a choice between cheap and reliable and expensive and unreliable, it's not a tough decision, and we can see what every user and every
Sure.
business is going to choose.
Sure. Well, is there going to be any relationship between these three versions now of Bitcoin? I mean, we already have Bitcoin, we have Bitcoin Cash. We're going to have this one. Have they even identified a name that it's going to be? I mean, I've heard three or
Everybody's
four different versions. That's why I'm asking you.
In addition to arguing over the technical aspects of how the chain should scale, everybody is busy arguing over the names as well. So there's plenty of people arguing over the names
Do you
out
have a
there.
preference for
But
one?
I think the chain with the longest chain with the most accumulated proof of work is the one that should be called Bitcoin. That's my general feeling in regards to that. In regards to all this arguing, in the initial days when the scaling debate was starting to heat up, I kept quiet. But the thing that really pushed me over the edge, and I had an opinion, but I was kind of happy to watch on the sidelines and not
Right.
get involved.
Right.
And the thing that really pushed me over the edge was when I saw one side of the debate engaging in massive censorship and just plain deleting anybody's post that had a dissenting opinion, and another side supporting free and open discussion and free speech in regards to this. That was all I needed to know in order to realize who were the good guys. So if Bitcoin is supposed to be censorship-resistant currency for the whole world, and if you're engaging in a bunch of censorship to try and protect Bitcoin censorship resistance, you've missed the entire point. And that's exactly what's been going on the small block side of this debate. They've engaged in massive censorship and propaganda when deleting anybody's post that disagrees to maintain Bitcoin as censorship resistant money. You've missed the entire point if you're engaging in that. And that's exactly what they're engaging in. So
Right.
I support free speech. I support free and open expression and discussion, and I support Bitcoin as censorship resistant money. And the other side, they claim they support Bitcoin as censorship resistant money, but why would I believe them when they're engaging in massive censorship themselves?
So you don't have a very high opinion of the Bitcoin core team. Uh, is there going to be anything that, I mean, if their version of Bitcoin starts to actually fail, do you think there's going to be a change in personnel of that core team? Or are they going to really just, die with it, go down with the ship, so to speak?
So I think they're kind of lucky that they managed to steal that name of Bitcoin Core. So originally Satoshi Nakamoto created the Bitcoin project. He turned over the entire project to a great guy named Gavin Andresen, who did an amazing job steering the course of Bitcoin from around, I don't know, 2010 or so till 2016, I think it was.
Right.
And he shared the GitHub repo with a number of other people because he wanted more help with the project. And then those other people literally locked him out of the project. So Satoshi turned over the keys to Gavin. Gavin shared those keys with other people. And then those other people took away his keys without his permission and kicked him out. And they did the same thing to Jeff Garzik there and stole the name and stole the GitHub repository and basically stole the whole project and completely veered the roadmap of the project from day one up until 2015 or so, when these people really took things over.
Right.
They've completely altered the entire course of the project, and then they claim that people that were involved from day one that want Bitcoin to go on the same roadmap, that was what inspired us to get involved, that we're the bad guys and we're the manipulators. This is like something out of the Twilight Zone, and they're engaged in massive censorship to do it as well. This is a really, really shocking and stunning. And anybody who's been around and been paying attention to this realizes that yeah, maybe the core developers have some, the current core developers are pretty good programmers and good at code review, but they are really on the wrong side of reality when it comes to thinking that people are going to use Bitcoin that's expensive and unreliable. And they're
Right.
really on the wrong side of morality if they think that they should be using censorship to maintain Bitcoin as a censorship resistant currency. And that's exactly what they've been doing.
Well, since you're talking about their acts of censorship, they've also been very vocal about denouncing 2x. I mean, do they view their self as the only right answer? I mean, it doesn't seem to me to be making sense that, I mean, they could say, in my opinion, fine, we're not going to do that, but why do they have to go to the extent of actually denouncing it the way that they have? I mean, they've had massive postings on their website. They maintain them still to this point. What do they hope to achieve by doing this? Do they hope to influence people simply because they're the core team?
I think they have this mentality that if we can't have it, no one can. Whereas on the big block side, I think the general attitude is if you don't like it, don't use it, and feel free to use whatever you want. I've noticed this incredible hostility from the small block side of the argument against every single altcoin. They think every altcoin is a scam. They think every ICO is a scam. They think anything that's not Bitcoin is a scam. And I've never said that from day one. I think if you find something useful, go ahead and use it in your life. So if you want to use Dogecoin, which I don't think is a good form of money, but feel free to do it. You're more than welcome to do it. I don't care. If you want to use any other crypto coin out there, go ahead and do it. It doesn't bother me one bit. If you don't like Bitcoin with 1 megabyte blocks, don't use it. If you don't like Bitcoin with 2 megabyte blocks, don't use it. If you don't like Bitcoin Cash, don't use it. But don't burn down somebody else's house just because you don't like it. Let them do whatever they want.
Right.
Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are supposed to be all about permissionless innovation. So let people innovate, and if somebody's doing something you don't like, don't worry about it. Don't participate in their project. Focus on what you're doing.
Right. Well, some people have actually said that that the SegWit 2x is being pushed by miners and really doesn't represent actual Bitcoin users. Do you believe that that's true in any way?
So the core people have been saying things like that. And again, that's a bunch of nonsense. The Bitcoin users that are the most dedicated, devout Bitcoin users are the miners. 100% of their income is in Bitcoin.
That's true.
All of
They're
their
fully vested.
resources are tied up in miners. Yeah, their entire lives revolve around Bitcoin. And how much more invested can you be in supporting Bitcoin and wanting Bitcoin to succeed than when 100% of your income is in Bitcoin and 100% of your income depends on Bitcoin being successful
Right.
and Bitcoin continuing to grow. So the miners are the most dedicated Bitcoin users in the entire world.
And probably the most heavy users, if you really step back and think about it. Because everything that they've done, they've really pushed all their chips into the center of the table, say we're all in. But there are some people who've complained about the quality of the 2x code. Some have suggested that the code is a little sloppy or maybe even mediocre at best. What are your thoughts about the quality of code? Is this code final, or is it going to be something that is going to be, evolving over time?
So Gavin Andresen and Jeff Garzik are two of the main guys working on it that have a fantastic track record. And even if I completely concede the point that the core team are better programmers and write tighter code that's cleaner with less bugs, it doesn't matter. They've broken the economic code of Bitcoin. They're intentionally trying to make Bitcoin be unreliable and have high fees. And even if the code works absolutely perfectly with no bugs, if you design a system with the wrong goals in mind of high fees and unreliable transactions, people are going to use something else. So, and I don't necessarily concede the point that they are better programmers, but even if I were to, it doesn't matter if they're busy coding with the wrong goals in mind, which they certainly are.
Okay. Well, Bitcoin has become quite political, both internally within the community and externally. So let's start with some of the internal issues. I mean, we know that there's bad blood within the community, but do you expect that there is going to be any long-term impact due to these disagreements? I mean, how are you affected by all of these? I mean, you're taking this very libertarian viewpoint and stand towards either the adoption of Bitcoin or even potentially other altcoins. But I mean, what is that? Is that going to create a rift that is just going to just decamp everybody to their own little camps, and then we'll fight battles in the future from those camps?
Yeah, so I guess it's worth pointing out also that there wasn't really any bad blood at all. There was certainly lots of heated debate and people were arguing about this sort of thing, but it wasn't hostile. There wasn't any viciousness on this until the censorship started. And that's what really made everybody get really riled up and upset, is that when the biggest discussion platform, our Bitcoin and BitcoinTalk.org, and our Bitcoin has more people visiting it every single day than probably every single other Bitcoin news website in the world combined. That's how big of a platform our Bitcoin is. And when the censorship on there started, that's when people got really upset and the attacks became really vicious on both sides, because if Bitcoin's supposed to be censorship resistant money, don't engage in censorship to
Right.
try and maintain that. So that's when things really got really heated up and got mean and nasty, to be honest. And in regards to your question, though, I'm looking forward to a day when there's a divorce between the people
Okay.
that want Bitcoin to have high fees and be unreliable and don't support free speech, and the people who want Bitcoin to become a worldwide currency to rival and hopefully replace the euro, the dollar, and the yen, and support free speech and support free association and support people being allowed to live their own lives however they want, so long as it's peaceful. So I can't wait for a divorce between those two parties, and my life will be much happier once that divorce fully comes. And I'm not sure exactly how that divorce will come, but I think it's coming, and I look forward to it coming because my life and everybody else who supports free association and free speech is life will be much happier after that point.
Okay, so let's now look a little bit externally. People like Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan has publicly called Bitcoin a bubble. What do you think of his position?
I think he either doesn't fully understand Bitcoin, or he sees Bitcoin as a threat to what he's up to currently, and was lashing out against that threat. But I suspect it's probably the first. I think he just doesn't fully understand why Bitcoin is so incredibly useful as money, and it's certainly less of a bubble than the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar can be printed as many of them as they want at any time for any reason. With Bitcoin, that can't happen. So at the very least, Bitcoin's less of a bubble on that front.
Okay, but he's not the only one. Ray Dalio from Bridgewater Associates has also called into question the viability of Bitcoin. I mean, both of these men are billionaires, and they appear to have a deep understanding of the financial markets and the value of money and how the velocity of money works and what the impact is of inflation due to just the public printing of money. I mean, how is it that they can be so wrong about Bitcoin?
So I think the proof is in the pudding there. So both those guys may be billionaires, but if you look at the investments that they've made over the last 5 years, I doubt any of them have outperformed Bitcoin. And so all these libertarians, I think, have a very good understanding of money, and that's why they started investing in Bitcoin so early on. And so their investments have done better on a percentage basis than Jamie Dimon's or any of these other
Right.
traditional bankers' investments.
Mm.
So that's a pretty good piece of empirical evidence that advocates of Bitcoin are on the right track when it comes to what makes something useful as money. Whereas I'd like to point out also the CEO of Blockstream, Adam Back, the leader of the small block 1 megabyte charge, he had a personal invitation from Satoshi Nakamoto to get involved with Bitcoin before Bitcoin even launched. And he had such a limited understanding of the economics of Bitcoin and why Bitcoin would become successful as money that he didn't get involved in Bitcoin in any way whatsoever until Bitcoin was already about $1,000 each. Whereas with myself, who my own background is in economics, as soon as I heard about Bitcoin, I realized I knew people were going to start using it as money. So I went out and bought as much of it as I could when they were still around $1 a piece. So you have one person, Adam Back can run circles around me when it comes to coding up computer code and the mathematics that underlie Bitcoin, but he has absolutely no clue when it comes to the underlying economics of Bitcoin and the economic reasons that made Bitcoin a success. And if he did have an understanding, he would have bought a whole bunch of it in the earliest days. And even to this very day, he says that he thinks people will still use Bitcoin if it costs $1,000 per transaction. He's absolutely wrong, and that just shows he has absolutely no understanding of the economic reasons why Bitcoin came to be used as money. And he's actively, not because he's a bad guy, just because he doesn't understand, he's actively damaging Bitcoin's usefulness as money. And that's heartbreaking for me as someone who has been one of the most prolific spreaders of Bitcoin to people around the world.
Right. Well, China, as we know, has ended all ICOs, and they're terminating all of the trading at the exchanges, and yet they continue to be the.
So if I can interject.
Hang on. Let me finish the question. They continue to be, though, the center of all Bitcoin mining. I mean, they're the superpower of Bitcoin mining. So how are they going to, negotiate these two positions where one is they have an economy that now has a high dependence on this product, and they're turning around and saying on the other side, you can't actually use this locally. I mean, how do you think this is going to happen? I mean, I don't even know how to ask it any further.
Maybe they've gotten some politicians in Beijing that 99.9999% of the Chinese people have never met and know nothing about, got together and wrote down some words on a piece of paper and called it a law and decided they would threaten all these other peaceful people with violence if they don't obey those words they wrote down on a piece of paper. And I'd like to point out that I don't think writing down words on a piece of paper and calling the law alters morality in any way
I
whatsoever.
agree.
So if it was morally acceptable for people to engage in ICOs before they wrote down those words on a piece of paper, it's still morally acceptable for people to engage in ICOs after they wrote down those words on a piece of paper. And I don't think it's done particularly much to stop people. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies allow for permissionless innovation all over the world. So I'm sure there's still tons of Chinese and people participating in ICOs and trading cryptocurrencies and doing all sorts of things. And they have to be a little bit more careful about it now than they did before, because maybe those bad people in Beijing will hurt them over it. But it didn't stop it. It's not going to stop it. Bitcoin, and I'm looking forward to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies undermining the control of those people in Beijing, right? Why should a few people in Beijing get to control a billion people in the rest of China? And why should any of these politicians in the capitals of any of these countries get to have a say in anybody's life? We're all human beings. We're all in this, rock flying around in outer space. Why should one small group of human beings get to boss everybody else around? It's absolute nonsense. And that's why I'm involved in Bitcoin, to put an end to this nonsense. Bitcoin puts every human being on the same level playing field. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing for anybody that believes in equal rights. Obviously, the politicians don't. They're trying to rule over their fellow human beings, but Bitcoin to the rescue and cryptocurrencies to the rescue. So that's why I'm involved.